Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters. I hope you're all performing your salahs and looking to the Qur'an for guidance in all your affairs. If you're watching this video and it's salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please also check out the description section of this video to get my new dawah products and to support the channel. I was sent a video by a channel member of a recent interview of Candace Owens and Andrew Tate, where Candace was telling Andrew about the positives of her faith and expressing disappointment at the fact that he left Christianity. I've said it before, I like Candace and how she represents herself, and I've got to admit, the way she stood up for Christianity and outlined the evils that go against her faith was very similar to how Muslims do and say the same thing. However, the difference is Candace is one voice amongst a sprinkle of voices standing up for Christianity, the same way the majority of Muslims stand up for Islam. Most Christians don't represent Christianity like she does. In fact, they either mix their religion with liberalism or are too afraid to speak up. If more Christians were like Candace, the faith would be more respected and Muslims would have more in common with them, as well as possibly uniting with them in battling issues to uphold Abrahamic religious values, especially concerning the evils facing our children in the Western world. Brother Andrew also outlined why he left Christianity for Islam and why he feels it is a better solution for modern day Satanism. Let's roll the clip.
And this is where religion comes in, right? Because I used to be an atheist. And then exactly what you just said about there's something divine about marriage, and exactly like you said, there's such a thing as sin. Everything you're talking about is religious. You're completely correct. You eventually, if you're going to wake up and be the kind of person who has hard parameters and said, this is right, this is wrong, it's very difficult to do that without then turning and understanding that has to come from God. Who else is going to decide what is right and what is wrong? And people say, oh, they're all man-made religions. Well, then why does it go against so many of the wills of man? Some of the sins that man want to go and do, the religions are against. If we made a religion wouldn't be against our own sins, would it?
Right.
It's interesting that this is almost proof for God in so many ways when you're going to wake up and realize that there is genuine evil in the world and there's genuine good in the world, and there are two sides and two camps. And I do believe that the good is on the side of truth, and I do believe that comes from God. And there's many different ways to God. I think there is one God and there's different religions, and I don't want to argue the differences between the religions, because I think we have a lot more in common than we have, especially in the fight against evil, than we have as differences. But yeah, it's super interesting. And you're right. Firm lines are absolutely not really required. And if we don't have them, it's why society ends up in the position it's in.
Realize that God designed a man to be with a woman because it prevents men from giving entirely into the worst components of who men are. Just having sex all the time.
Yeah,
right? You can't do that. If you're with a woman, okay, maybe it's menstruation, maybe it's pregnancy, maybe it's afterbirth, but there are these natural barriers that make it so that your relationship has to be about something else other than just sex. So then you talk about how that bleeds into pornography, that bleeds into wanting to talk about sexuality in the classroom, how that might bleed in to suddenly wanting to speak to children about sex and go, oh, this is all normal. It's actually not normal, but because it's normal in a homosexual relationship, you think that it's actually normal.
Totally right.
And so I have suddenly realized, and this is why I become so staunchly conservative, how it all bleeds into everything. And there is such a thing as objective rightness, and there is such a thing as objective wrongness.
Completely correct. And I agree with absolutely everything you just said. So my question would be then, what do we do? Do we force everybody to be Christians or force everybody to be religious, or how do we do it?
Well, I think the first thing is having the courage to talk about it. And nobody even talks about these topics anymore because they just go, oh, they've won, so we need to let this go. And more you're seeing culturally, people are afraid of being canceled. I mean, what I just said to you is grounds for a cancellation. How dare you question this? How dare you? I even believe now, after seeing the ways in which society has made children believe that they're all trans. I went to university. I went to high school. I didn't graduate with a single trans person. Now you want me to believe 1 in 4 children suffers from identity issues? No, that's socialization.
Completely.
You place that on them. So is it such a far stretch to imagine that the same happened in the when homosexuality came to America, and then we popularized it and we put Ellen on TV and we gave Melissa Etheridge a platform, and suddenly pride parades were happening everywhere. Whereas you don't see this here. You don't see this here in Romania, where we're sitting, because we haven't. This is the power of culture. This is the power of pop culture. When you make something, you have to go the other way.
Completely.
You need to normalize it. You need to say, actually, this is abnormal.
Absolutely.
And this is what normal is. And it's not both.
You are right. We are in a culture war. And it's culture which is absolutely not really defining the direction in which we move. And this is one of the reasons why I reverted to Islam, because I feel like the Islamic culture is the strongest. You feel the culture.
I was
you
wondering,
feel
because
it.
you were Christian, and I definitely do not know enough about the Islamic faith to sit here and debate you on it. I'm never a person that will debate somebody on something that I'm not an expertise on. But I will say that I'm sad that you're not a Christian anymore, because I can sense perhaps it's because you felt that Christians weren't doing a good job defending their beliefs?
Yeah, I think that God should be feared. I believe that God should be feared. I fear God. It's one of the only things I fear. And I believe that also you see God to a degree, or you see religion, how you see yourself. And I see myself as a person of strong principles and strong morals. And I like to think of myself as the kind of person nobody really wants to cross, not because I'm a psycho, but because I'm a man of capability and I'm smart and I'm strong and nobody wants to make an enemy of me. So I feel like I find an affinity to a belief system which has very similar outlooks. There's a whole bunch of other things I can say from the Quran and Islamic texts, etc. But to keep it very vague and very broad for people who are not Islamic, I felt God when I was in an Islamic country. If I went to an Islamic country,
That's the problem.
I
The
felt
West-
God.
West is
You don't
Christian.
feel any God.
I think
How is
that's
it a
it.
Christian country if Satanists are mocking Jesus on the streets?
I understand what you're saying. And I was trying to gather in my head what pulled him away from Christianity. And I said it's probably the example. If you're thinking that America is a Christian country and you're thinking that the United Kingdom is a Christian country,
They're not. They're
and you're
not.
going, Christianity is getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And the truth is that America is no longer a Christian country. We're being run by people that are satanic. Hollywood is satanic and
Right.
Hollywood is running America.
Correct.
So you're not wrong. But I think that right now America is facing a spiritual battle. And for the first time in a very long time, Christians are starting to stand up and speak about our principles.
I hope so. And
we
I
could have used you as a
I know.
Christian.
But I have seen in California, I've seen Christians and Muslims get side by side when they were complaining about the LGBT
I did
teachings
see
in
that
schools, which is
recently.
fantastic. And I know what you're saying, and that is true. But it's almost like when I go to an Islamic country, I feel God around. You see it. You see it in the way the people are dressed. You see it in the fact that everyone's in a family. You see it in the fact that there's a mosque on every corner. It's in the air. And it's almost like when I'm in Dubai and I'm talking to my friends, my Islamic friends, and I explain to them the things you have to protect your child from in an American school. They literally think I'm lying. They're like, no, surely. Like, it's
What about
mind-bending
Africa?
to them.
What about African countries that are Christian?
Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. So
Yeah, they still are mind blown by the concept of what we're fighting in America. So America is unique. We shouldn't say that this is the
You're right.
blanket.
You're right. They're right. There are Christian countries which still take Christianity.
And they're like, what
very
do you
seriously.
mean men can be women? Like they think you're crazy.
And we're in Romania, and Romania is a country which is very
Christian.
conservative and very
And
Christian.
very Christian.
And they don't buy into any of this garbage
No,
either.
none of it.
So this is absolutely not really true. It's unfair to say all Christian countries are like that.
America is an exception and not in a good way.
Yeah, I think like the whole West is, unfortunately.
The
I feel
West, the West is. I've said on my show the entire time. The West is falling. The fact that we're even having these debates is not good.
yeah, the West has fallen, and unfortunately,
Russia,
Yeah.
Christian country.
Yeah, absolutely, a very Christian country. So yeah, you are right, but I felt an affinity to Islam. I felt God in the air, and it's difficult for me to explain any other way.
Okay, that's fair enough. We're right now debating whether or not, children can pick their gender. How did we get here? This is something that you couldn't even fathom when we were in high school, that people would be saying like your little boy could be a little girl, but we're here today and actual adults are believing this information because it's been said enough times to whatever segment of the population that they're accepting it as true. So they do it because it's been effective.
And that's why God is so important, because God is a hard line that you cannot be crossed. If you have faith, then there's rights and wrongs. Like you said earlier, there's sin and there's good, and there's a line that can't be crossed, and the psyop is very difficult to penetrate. And that's why in the Islamic world, for example, we have very little of these problems because it's haram. Problem solved. Haram. Next.
A lot of valid points were made here. Firstly, I'd like to address what Candace said. She made a lot of sense when speaking about the media and the rainbow community when trying to convince Andrew to come back to Christianity. And she also said a lot of Christians are a lot more vocal about speaking up against evil Western agendas. But when Brother Andrew correctly pointed out that he doesn't feel God in Western nations, Candace had to talk about some Christian African nations and Russia to show examples of Christianity being practiced properly. Whereas Muslims in the West are not shy about shutting down ungodly agendas as soon as we see them. In fact, we do that in any country we're in. I would encourage Muslims and non-Muslims to visit Muslim countries to experience what Brother Andrew Tate meant by feeling God in a country. It truly is a very moving experience. Back to Candace. So Africa as a continent is more Muslim than Christian, and let's not forget that colonization was how Christianity was spread in Africa, which had mostly tribal faiths and Islam previous to that enslavement process. Also, Jesus' skin colour was changed, and Christianity was used for racial superiority purposes controversies over people from Africa. Just saying. In terms of Russia, I have a lot of respect for that country. Yes, they have a huge practicing Christian population, but they also host the largest Muslim population in all of Europe. A prime example is the state of Dagestan, where UFC legend and good Muslim brother Khabib is from. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin recently speaking up against the Swedish Quran burning and saying it would be illegal in his country further confirms how great a country Russia is. If more Christians were like Candace and the Christians in Russia, I think Muslims and Christians could unite in the fight against evil, whilst respecting each other's faiths. However, sadly, the Christians I come across online seem only concerned with quarrelling against Muslims, like it's one football team against the other, rather than addressing the real problems in the West. I think the question shouldn't be whether Brother Andrew will return to Christianity, but instead it should be whether Candace needs to convert to Islam to have an army backing her message. She would actually have a global community at her disposal, and if Candace ever did become Muslim, I feel it would be an easy transition as she already doesn't drink alcohol and is very vocal about speaking up against things that are haram in both the Quran and the Bible. Please like, comment, share, subscribe and turn on notifications as I'll be posting new content daily. Jazakallah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah